What is good, everybody out there? Thank you for joining me again today at Court Thoughts, the channel where we basically talk basketball. Today, I'm going to be giving you my 3 favorite retro basketball shoes that are not Jordans. Let's put it this way, right? Like, most of the classic Jordans, especially for me as a kid who grew up playing basketball in Australia in the 90s, Jordans were a real big thing. Most of the time when you were trying to get shoes to play in, you were mostly playing in Jordans, and there's a lot of nostalgic value to it, but I don't want to do what everyone else was talking about and talking about Jordans. There's obviously a lot of well-known ones out there that everyone likes, but today we're going to be talking about my 3 favorite shoes from that era that are not Jordans. So here we go. Alright, so the first one to kick off the list is the Reebok Kamikaze 2. Man, what can I say about this shoe? This for me was one of those shoes that when it came out, it just caught your eye. Like, obviously you got the zigzag feature that's on the shoe. Being, like I said, a kid growing up in the 90s, the shoe came out in 95, so I was really quite young, but it's one of those shoes that it just sticks with you. It's just real bright, like the features are real bright, the zigzag feature, but I was also a real big fan of like crazy dunks, like most people. Like, dunks back then were like, they were like the main staple. Like, now for people to see like long distance threes is like a big thing, right? And dunks is still obviously a big thing, but to see like a man body someone as bad as Shawn Kemp did back in the 90s, he was murking dudes left, right, and center, and he did a lot in this. Shoe came out in 1995 and came out in a couple of different colorways. This is actually one of the signature colorways for his Seattle Supersonics jersey kit that they had, but they also had another one that was like all black with white. Anytime that I've been able to try and get my hands on these, I generally do. They're really obviously like pretty bulky. They're not really something like I would play in. I've seen people playing them now, and even low cuts, like when Isaiah Thomas was playing with, I think he was playing with Sacramento, he was sponsored by Reebok, and he was wearing them. They're not necessarily the lightest shoe, but the look of the shoe, and it's just a dope looking shoe, man. There's actually this really cool like feature that they've got throughout it. So their padding that they used was kind of similar to what Puma does with this thing called Pumacell, but these guys, I think it's called Hexalite, but it's basically like a bunch of little hexagons in there. I think you guys can see that there, little bunch of hexagons, and they just basically compress when you're walking through. And there's a little bit up in the forefront, if I can face it to the camera. Again, man, you can't go wrong. A lot of signature moments in these, and if you do get a chance to cop some, especially in the OG colorway, sometimes Reebok, when they reissue them, they do them in some pretty crazy colors. I know that they did one for Dream Team 2. I'm pretty sure he played on Dream Team 2 if I remember correct, and they did a colorway for that not too long ago. But man, I had to start the list off with these bad boys. These for me, oof. What can I say? Can't go wrong. Kamikaze 2. Alright, so the second shoe that I've got for my top 3 shoes from the 90s that are not Jordans is this bad boy right here. Okay, so the Nike Air Zoom Flight, the glove, was originally released in 1998. And this colorway, known as the Lakers Edition colorway, it's a Vault colorway, came out in 2013. But for me, man, the first time that I saw these, I remember thinking like, what are they? Where can I get them? And how many can I get? And I was hella young, obviously wasn't able to buy any shoes, but man, I remember seeing them and just thinking they're so dope. And even now, like, you see people wearing them and you can tell like, oh, that's a sneakerhead, or that's a hoop dude, you know what I mean? This shoe is pretty comfortable. It's got zoom throughout the shoe, so it gives a nice responsive feel, but man, the shoes just got this really nice appeal to it. This extra, like, this toe panel here, it's really, really nice. Really, like, it just adds this extra look to it. A lot of the shoes back then, because the technology was, I wouldn't say super groundbreaking, like there was obviously some groundbreaking technology that they had when they were introducing things like, you know, Zoom Air units and whatnot, but a lot of them were very much like aesthetics. So like if you think about, you know, the last shoe that I just pulled up, you know, the Kamikaze, they were all really like striking looking shoes, like very visually appealing looking shoes. And this bad boy is, you know, still to me in that class. So it's got this full shroud that comes up, so you can zip it up, and it's got the full zip up feature that gives it this extra like dope look. The swoosh is obviously a big feature, and it kind of reminds me a little bit of the Rodmans, the Endestructs. But for me, I really like the shoe because it does feel quite comfortable. You could probably still play in these if they were doing like, you know, retro mods. So for those of you that don't know what retro mods are, they get like retro shoes and modify them to make them up to like today's standards. But you could easily play in these shoes again, and they're still comfortable, a little bit heavier, obviously in comparison to a lot of the shoes that are out now. But the contrast between having the black and then having the Volt is like, it's something else. It's also got this cool monkey paw stabilizer on the inside. Just adds a little bit of extra support. Like I said, it doesn't really do too much, but man, these shoes were just so dope to see. Nike was really killing it back then too. Like, they've got my next shoe, which is also a Nike shoe, but there was a lot of really good shoes coming out around about that time from Nike, and they were definitely ahead of the game. But that's this bad boy right here. Alright, so moving into the third and final shoe for the list today, we have the Nike Penny 2, right, or Air Penny 2. Man, like I said before, with the Gary Paytons, like Nike was really killing it back in the day. Like they still obviously kill it now. They dominate the sports footwear business, like clothing business. But when these guys came out, like there was so much hype, not just around Penny as a player, but like it felt like shoes were like, they were a big thing, you know. And I remember like being so young and seeing these shoes and being like, what are they, you know, and different things would gravitate towards me, like the sole pattern, you know. I don't necessarily think that this is probably the best traction wise, like in comparison to like something really classic and simple. You know, even these are pretty, you know, they got like pretty classic sort of pattern with the lateral marks, but the shoe was just like, it's just got this like liquid-esque feature to it, and this definitely was you know, where they were heading in the direction. When you start to look at some of the other things that came out around about that time, like everything was very liquid looking, with like things like the foam posits and the way that they were manipulating the foam to give it that extra sort of wobble texture to it. But man, I really love these shoes. The shoes originally came out in 1997. For me, I was a little bit older by that time, and so I was able to have a little bit more of an appreciation for shoes. I got to play in a pair of these and I loved them to death, and I was really upset when they fell apart. I didn't have this exact colorway. There's another colorway that's all white, but this is one of the original colorways, the original Orlando colorways, Orlando Magic. Basketball, like back in the 90s, especially around about that time, that mid to, you know, late 90s, was going through a real big boom. Obviously courtesy to Michael Jordan. Like Michael Jordan, not even like now, he's obviously like this global phenomenon, but he was ginormous back then, because of the fact of what he was doing for the game and how he was like dominating the game. But it was also the fact that there was other things, like in Australia we had, the videos that would come out on TV. There was like jam session videos and stuff. It was like compilation videos.
It's almost like jam
VHS
session?
of like, people dunking on people and whatnot. And Penny Hardaway had an especially good time in the limelight until unfortunate injuries that sort of derailed his career, and he became a little bit of a what if. But playing with a young Shaq and being this guy who was really like pass dominant, like he was a pass first type guard. He was still someone who could score, but a real pass friendly point guard. Being a bigger point guard, he was like always on the highlight reels. For anyone out there who's not familiar with Penny Hardaway, I highly recommend jump on YouTube, check out some highlights of him, because the guy was a god. Unfortunate that he copped the injuries that he copped, but man, these shoes definitely bring back a lot of memories. These shoes, this particular shoe here was released back in 2015 as a retro, but the original was back in 1997, and they started retroing the shoes back in 2008. So they were obviously a fan favorite, and people try to get their hands on them. They have released this model in a couple of other different colorways, but they generally seem to release them in the retro nods. And for me, man, they're a little bit heavier, but the wraparound burst bubble that's on there, it's like, in comparison to the original shoes that were coming out back in that day, there was a lot of foam. There was a lot of dense, thick foam. And so having a shoe that had this like extra air pocket, exposed air pocket, you felt like you had that extra cushioning. But they're just a dope looking shoe, man. Again, traction's probably not the best, but man, dope shoe. Can't go wrong. Absolutely love these bad boys. Air Penny 2. Alright, so that does it for today's list. My favorite shoes from the 90s, my favorite 3 shoes from the 90s that are not Jordans. It's pretty hard to get past Jordans back in the 90s. I still wear Jordans. Don't get it twisted. Still love Jordans. But man, I have to say that these 3 bad boys for me, they just do it. There was a lot of other really good shoes that I didn't mention. So please jump in the comments and let me know, what was your favorite shoe from the 90s that I didn't mention, that was not a Jordan. I'd love to hear what you think. Thank you for checking in today and joining me with Court Thoughts. Until next time, stay safe and peace.